best way to defeat this enemy in the long run is to deny them the recruiting tools that are and recruitments made possible by resentment.
Hi, my name is Mark Capella, and this is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we'll be discussing the election of George W. Bush and why your vote doesn't actually matter. The 2000 election was perhaps the most controversial election in our nation's history due to the fact that Al Gore, the Democratic candidate, won the popular vote while George Bush, the Republican candidate, won the electoral vote, giving him the presidency.
Actually, I'm pretty sure whoever gets the most votes wins the election.
Yeah, sure thing, but not quite. In America, our president is determined by the Electoral College, and each state has a number of electoral voters equal to the number of House of Representatives members plus the members of the Senate. And your vote only matters depending on what state you're in. Some states have laws saying that their electoral voters can only vote based on the popular opinion of the state, based on the popular vote. But some states do not have these regulations, so their Electoral College will vote loyal to their party. In fact, a situation where a candidate who lost a popular vote but won the electoral vote, and thus become president, has only occurred 4 times in our nation's history. Once in 1824, where Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, but the House of Representatives picked John Quincy Adams to be the president. In 1876, when Samuel Tilden won the popular vote, but Rutherford B. Hayes won the Electoral College 185 to 184. In 1888, when Grover Cleveland lost to Benjamin Harrison 233 to 168, and in 2000, when George Bush beat Al Gore in the electoral vote despite losing the popular vote, which we'll get into more during this video.
Ooh, Mr. Capella! If this has happened before, why is this election so controversial?
Well, going into Florida, the race was neck and neck with both the Electoral College and the popular vote. Media projections had Gore winning Florida by a landslide, but early voting statistics showed Bush had the overwhelming lead in the state, and people began to assume he was the next president. Unfortunately for Bush, that wasn't the case. Eventually, the race became so close that Florida state law required a recount. However, problems with some of the ballots prevented machines from reading them correctly. Votes were miscounted due to the fact that some voters had trouble punching holes in their ballot cards.
Ooh, Mr. Capella! What happened to the votes that couldn't be read by the machines?
Well, this is where most of the actual controversy occurs. Initially, the event went to the Florida Supreme Court, and they ruled that a manual recount would be necessary to account for these votes, which does make sense due to the fact that the machines were unable to read these votes. However, legal pressure from the Bush administration challenged this ruling, and the issue ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. In a very controversial 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court ruled that a manual recount of some of the votes, but not all of them, was a violation of the fact that all votes must be treated equally. All citizens are granted equal protection under the law, and all votes must be treated equally. I love America. But there was not enough time to recount an entire state's votes to meet the December 18th deadline, so the Supreme Court's ruling essentially elected who was going to be president, which is extremely unique, and the reason that this election is remembered as being so controversial.
Now I will demonstrate how tough it is to punch a hole in the ballot. First, get your ballot and your hole puncher. Line up the ballot with the hole puncher and proceed to press down firmly on the hole puncher. Make sure it goes all the way through. Release the hole puncher and extract the ballot. Now, this is a very simple process, and while the ballots were extremely confusing for Florida voters, punching the holes and dealing with hanging chads and pregnant chads should not have been an issue.
This is a map representing the Electoral College votes for the 2000 election. Each state has a number representing how many electoral votes it is worth, and a color for which candidates its votes went towards. Red states were won by George Bush, and blue states were won by Al Gore. Just looking at the colors of the states, and not the number of electoral votes, it looks like Bush won pretty easily, winning 31 states to Gore's 19. However, the states Al Gore won had more electoral votes, which is what caused the race to be so close, with Bush winning 271 electoral votes to Gore's 266. And that's why winning Florida was so important to either candidate's victory, because Florida's 25 electoral votes would pretty much determine the outcome of the election.
This ballot was another very controversial aspect of the 2000 election. This ballot was only used in Palm Beach County, and on this ballot, Pat Buchanan received 3,400 votes. It is speculated that these people meant to vote for Al Gore because of the fact that Gore is the second one down from the left and Buchanan's bubble is his second bubble on the card, and due to the fact that 20% of Buchanan's total votes nationwide came from this one county. These votes would have led to Gore becoming elected because a majority of Florida's electoral voters vote with the popular opinion of the state, and Gore only lost Florida by a couple hundred votes.
This image shows the different ways that the holes were punched in the ballot cards during the 2000 election, all of which caused issues except for the clean punch. So the first hole that some of these ballot cards had in them was the clean punch, which was very easy for the machines to read. It was the way that these ballots were designed to be punched. The next was a hanging chad, where one part of the hole was still attached, and this caused issues for the machines reading the cards because of that little piece of paper hanging off the edge. The next is a swinging chad, where two parts of the little piece of paper that was supposed to be punched out was still attached, causing the flap to swing, hence the name swinging chad. The next is a tri-chad, where only one corner of the paper that's supposed to be punched out is actually punched. This is one of the types of holes that wasn't fully punched that really started to cause issues for the machines, because it was almost like the paper wasn't actually punched, it was just torn a little bit. The next is a slit chad, where all four corners of the hole are still attached. There's just a couple slits on the side of them. And the last type of hole that was punched, wasn't really even a hole, was a dimpled or pregnant chad, where the hole wasn't even made, it was just kind of punched in like a little indent. So this caused major issues for the machines because it was almost like someone didn't even punch the hole, it was just bent a little bit. So these were the major issues with the ballot cards during the 2000 election. All these incompletely punched holes is really the whole reason that the election is so controversial.
Overall, the legacy of the 2000 election of George W. Bush will live on as being extremely controversial. The uniqueness of this election sets it apart from all others in American history because it was essentially the Supreme Court who ended up choosing the president. This fact, combined with all of the controversy surrounding the votes themselves, made this election unforgettable. Additionally, this election will live on in history due to the fact there is no possible way it can happen again. The introduction of electronic voting booths eliminate a large portion of user error, but glitches or malfunctions in these polls could cause problems in the future. However, it is likely that no election will come close to being as controversial as the 2000 election.